The auctioneer's gavel struck, a sharp crack echoing through the hollow hall, sealing the fate of the only home Sarah and I had truly shared. Walter Croft, leaning against the stage, offered a dismissive half-smile, triumph chilling his eyes. "Some things," he drawled, "are just out of reach for folks like you, Caleb." My jaw tightened, a cold knot forming in my gut. The last box, labeled Kitchen Misc, in Sarah's neat handwriting, slid from the truck bed. My shoulders ached, a dull throb that had been with me since sunrise, but a different kind of ache had settled in my chest, a quiet hope. We were in Fairwood Estates now, a place of wide lawns and identical brick fronts, far from the city noise and the memories we were trying to outrun. Sarah's hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, had strands escaping around her face, softened by the afternoon light. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of dirt across her cheek. She didn't seem to notice. "This is it, Caleb," she said, her voice a little breathless, a smile spreading across her face. "Our fresh start. The upstairs sunroom will be perfect for the studio. Imagine light pouring in all day for fabrics and sketches." She gestured with a dreamy sweep of her arm toward the second floor, her eyes already seeing past the bare walls and stacked boxes. I just nodded, a small smile of my own forming. Her optimism was a physical thing, something I could lean against when mine felt thin. The smell of fresh paint still lingered, a clean, new smell that promised something different. We were wrestling the kitchen misc, boxed through the front door when a sharp, distinct rap echoed from the screen. Sarah jumped, startled. I turned to see a man standing on our porch, framed by the pale blue trim. He was tall, dressed in a crisp polo shirt, and his smile was a little too bright, a little too even. He held a large, wicker gourmet basket in one hand, overflowing with cheeses and what looked like a bottle of wine. "Welcome to Fairwood Estates," he boomed, his voice carrying an easy confidence. "Walter Croft, I developed this whole neighborhood." His gaze drifted from me, bypassed the box, and settled on Sarah. It lingered there for a fraction of a second too long, tracing the curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell around her ear. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down my spine, tightening my shoulders. It wasn't overt, not threatening, just possessive. A flicker, like a lamp turning on and off in a darkened room. I stepped forward, putting myself between him and Sarah, a small, unconscious movement. "Caleb Miller," I said, extending my hand. His grip was firm, almost aggressively so. "And this is my wife, Sarah." Walter's eyes flicked back to Sarah, his smile unchanging. "Sarah," he repeated, the name drawn out just slightly. "A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. You have a real charm about you, Sarah. You'll fit right in here." The compliment felt less like a welcome and more like an assessment. My unease grew, a low hum beneath my ribs. "So," Walter continued, turning his attention between us, "what do you two do? Always curious about the new faces moving into my community." He chuckled, a soft, practiced sound. "I'm an accountant," I said, feeling suddenly mundane. Sarah, still a little flushed from the heat and the moving, answered next. "I'm a surgical nurse, and I'm hoping to start my own interior design studio here once we're settled." Walter's smile, for the briefest moment, faltered. A micro-expression gone almost before I registered it, a flicker of something that looked like disappointment or perhaps surprise on his otherwise perfectly composed face when she mentioned being a nurse. It was barely there, but I saw it. Then it smoothed away, replaced by the same too bright charm. He nodded slowly. "An accountant. Important work, I suppose. Keeps the book straight." His tone held a faint condescending edge, like he was discussing the sorting of paper clips. He shifted the gourmet basket to his other arm. "Anyway, we're having a little welcome party Saturday evening. Just a casual get-together for the new residents and some of the established families. You two should come. It'll be a good chance to meet everyone." He paused, looking at Sarah again. "I'm sure you'll look stunning in anything, Emily." He said Emily with the same casual confidence he'd used for everything else. Sarah blinked, a small crease appearing between her brows. Before she could correct him, Walter was already turning, his perfect smile still in place. "Well, enjoy getting settled. See you Saturday." With a final nod, he descended the steps, his gait unhurried, leaving the gourmet basket on our porch. The screen door clicked shut. I stood there, the dull ache in my shoulders replaced by a sharp, tight knot in my stomach. The afternoon sun still shone, the air was still warm, but something had shifted. It felt like stepping onto a chessboard, the first move already made, and I hadn't even realized the game had begun. The gravel crunched under the tires of our old Honda Civic, a sound lost almost immediately in the hum of expensive engines idling in Walter Croft's sprawling driveway. His mansion rose before us, a monument to ambition, a two-story brick edifice with perfectly symmetrical windows and a flagstone path winding through manicured flower beds. It dwarfed the other homes in Fairwood Estates, making them look like accessories. The party was in full swing. A valet, young and dressed in a crisp uniform, opened Sarah's door before I even had the chance. Our Civic, reliable as it was, looked like a forgotten toy amidst the Mercedes and BMWs. Walter met us just inside the grand foyer, a smile already in place. He was wearing a dark blazer over an open-collared shirt, looking relaxed and in control. "Caleb, Sarah, glad you could make it," he said, his voice carrying easily over the muted chatter and distant clink of glasses. He took Sarah's hand, holding it a moment longer than necessary before releasing it. Then his hand found the small of her back, a light, almost imperceptible pressure, and he began to steer her subtly, gently, away from me. "Come, let me introduce you to a few people. You must meet the Hendersons. They live just down the street." I watched them go, feeling a familiar awkwardness settle over me like a heavy coat. Walter, with his effortless charm, was already introducing Sarah to a small group of impeccably dressed individuals near a wide archway. Her laugh, a little self-conscious, drifted back to me. I stood by myself for a moment, suddenly aware of the space around me, the unfamiliar faces, and the distant thrum of conversation that didn't include me. I recognized no one. "Here, you look like a man who could use this." A deep voice rumbled beside me. I turned to see a man, shorter than Walter but with a solid, compact build, holding out a glass of amber liquid. Mike Henderson, I remembered. He had a kind face, a little worn around the edges, and a firm handshake. He didn't wear a blazer. His shirt was plaid. "Mike Henderson, your neighbor. Walter's always got the good stuff for these shindigs." He nodded towards the glass in my hand. "Whiskey. Neat, like life should be." I took a slow sip. The warmth spread quickly. "Caleb Miller," I offered. "Thanks." Mike leaned in just slightly, his eyes scanning the room. "Don't let the show fool you, Caleb. Walter, he's a piece of work. Charming as a snake, twice as slippery." He took a gulp of his own drink. "He built this place, yeah, but he also thinks he owns everything in it, and everyone who lives here." He paused, letting the words hang. "He believes everything and everyone has a price." I raised an eyebrow. Curiosity piqued despite the knot in my stomach. "What do you mean?" Mike sighed, his gaze momentarily fixed on a spot across the room where Walter was still talking to Sarah. "My wife, Linda, she used to run a small catering business. Walter offered her a job, wanted her to handle all the events for his various enterprises. Sounded good on paper, sure. But then it started. The late-night calls, the suggestions about her wardrobe, the way he'd show up at our house unannounced with business proposals that were anything but." He shook his head, a grim set to his jaw. "She turned him down politely. Said she preferred her own clients, her own hours. That's when the harassment started. Nothing you could call the police about, mind you. Just little things. Permits suddenly getting held up. Local papers running anonymous tips about health code violations at her events. Lost her a few big contracts before we figured out what was going on. We had to threaten to hire a lawyer to get him to back off. He likes to push, to test boundaries." The whiskey suddenly tasted a little bitter. "That's something else," I managed. Just then, Walter reappeared at my side, seemingly materializing from the crowd. "Caleb, glad you're settling in." His smile was back, full wattage. "I was just telling Sarah about some of the exciting investment opportunities around here. I'd love to take you to lunch next week, discuss a few things. You being an accountant, you'd appreciate the numbers." It sounded less like an invitation and more like an expectation. He turned to Sarah, who had returned to stand quietly beside me. And Sarah, he continued, his tone shifting, I'm still thinking about your design eye. Really, the hospital? I imagine you'd be much more fulfilled putting those talents to use. My company always needs someone with a fresh perspective for our new development aesthetics. We could really use someone like you. He made the hospital sound like a dreary prison cell. Sarah offered a polite, practiced smile. That's very kind, Walter, but I'm quite happy at the hospital, and my design studio is more of a passion project for me right now, not a full-time venture. Walter just chuckled, a low, knowing sound. We'll see about that. He gave her a slow, deliberate wink that sent another shiver down my spine. It was a gesture that suggested he heard her words but didn't believe them, a silent promise that he would get his way eventually. He excused himself then, melting back into the crowd, leaving the sour taste of his confidence lingering in the air. The drive home was quiet at first, the Honda's engine a familiar drone against the suburban night. Then Sarah spoke, her voice tight. He's creepy, Caleb, and probably illegal, if half of what Mike was saying is true. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I know. She turned in her seat, facing me in the dim dashboard light. But we're not letting him run us off. We worked too hard for this house, Caleb. Too hard to just pack up and leave because of some rich bully. Her voice was firm, resolute, a steely edge to her determination. She had that look in her eye, the one that meant she was digging in. The phone buzzed on my desk, startling me. It wasn't often I got personal calls at work. The display read unknown number. Caleb Miller, I answered, my voice still in my professional register. Caleb, Walter Croft here. Just thought I'd give you a ring. I'm free for lunch today. How about you? I'm at the Union Grill. Table for two if you can make it. His voice was smooth, confident, leaving no room for a refusal. It wasn't a question, more of an informed command. The Union Grill was one of those places where the appetizers cost more than my usual lunch budget. I glanced at my calendar, an empty half-hour slot mocking me. Sure, Walter. I suppose I could squeeze it in. Excellent. See you in 20. And he hung up before I could add another word. 20 minutes later, I walked into the Union Grill, feeling underdressed in my standard office attire among the power suits and hushed conversations. Walter was already seated at a corner table, a glass of iced tea in front of him. He gestured to the empty chair. Glad you could make it, Caleb. I figured it was time we had a proper chat. The waiter came and I ordered a simple club sandwich. Walter, meanwhile, ordered a pan-seared scallops in a glass of imported sparkling water. After some polite small talk about the market and the weather, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on me. Let's be frank, Caleb. You're a fine accountant, I'm sure, but I didn't invite you here to pick your brain about quarterly earnings reports. My sandwich arrived, but my appetite had suddenly vanished. I waited. It's Sarah I'm interested in, he continued, his voice calm, factual. Her eye for design, her aesthetic. That's a real talent. And frankly, it's wasted pushing IVs at the county hospital. He took a sip of his sparkling water. I know her salary there, Caleb. Surgical nurse, decent enough for a starter home, but hardly enough to build a design empire. She told me she wants a studio. A dream like that needs capital. My blood ran cold. He knew her salary. How? And the brazenness of bringing it up. What are you getting at, Walter? My voice was tight. He smiled, a slow, predatory expression. I'm saying I want her to work for me. Not part-time, not a hobby, full-time. I have a dozen projects going on, new developments, remodels, high-end clients. She'd be perfect. My offer? Double her current nurse's salary. And a substantial signing bonus to get her studio off the ground. Think of it as seed money. I money, plus commission on every project. I stared at him, my fork suspended over my sandwich. Double her salary? A bonus? The numbers were staggering, but the audacity, the way he just laid it out, like he was buying a piece of property. Anger, hot and quick, flared in my chest. She's not for sale, Walter. He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. No one said she was, Caleb. This isn't a transaction. It's an opportunity. For her dreams. You yourself said she wanted to get her studio going. This is the fast track. No more scraping by. She can do her passion, be her own boss under my umbrella. It's what any husband who truly cares about his wife's ambition would want for her. He made it sound so logical, so benevolent. I returned to the office, the conversation replaying in my head. The numbers were too big to ignore. That evening, I laid it all out for Sarah, leaving nothing out. Her eyes, initially wide with shock at Walter's directness, slowly widened further as I repeated the figures. "Double my salary?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And a bonus for the studio?" She walked over to the window, looking out at our small patch of lawn, a hand pressed against her mouth. The implications sank in. This wasn't just a job. It was a catapult. "Caleb, with that kind of money," she turned, her eyes bright, "we could finish the upstairs studio in months. Get all the equipment I need, launch a proper website. This could change everything for my business. For us." "But Sarah, the way he came at it," I started, a knot forming in my stomach. "And what Mike said about his wife, it just doesn't feel right." She waved away my concerns with a dismissive hand. "Caleb, this is different. This is a legitimate business offer. He needs a designer. I'm a designer. It's purely professional. I know how to handle myself. I'm not some fragile thing who can't say no. I'll set boundaries." Her ambition, a thing I usually admired, was shining in her eyes, almost blinding her to everything else. "This is a means to an end, a temporary stepping stone. We won't be dependent on him forever." I looked at her face, animated with a hope I hadn't seen in years. The thought of taking that away, of telling her no because of my vague unease, felt like a betrayal of her dreams. My gut screamed, a low, persistent warning. But the numbers, in Sarah's fervent belief, were too strong to argue against. Reluctantly, I nodded. "Okay, Sarah, if you're sure, just be careful." Sarah started working for Walter a week later. She was initially thrilled. She'd come home talking about the creative freedom, the large budgets, the interesting projects. The financial boost was immediate, the bonus check a tangible relief. She bought samples, renovated the sunroom, and even hired a part-time assistant. For a few weeks, everything seemed to be going well. Then the gifts started, a bottle of expensive French perfume, delivered to our door with a small, discreet card, "For your discerning taste." Then a week later, a huge bouquet of exotic orchids, again with Walter's card. "A touch of beauty for a beautiful mind." "Caleb," I said one evening, holding up the card from the orchids, "this is too much, Amon. This isn't professional. He's trying to cross a line." My unease had escalated from a hum to a dull roar. Sarah, arranging the orchids in a vase, barely looked up. "Oh, Caleb, it's just Walter being Walter. He's an extravagant man. He sends gifts to all his important clients. It's a business tactic, that's all. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill." She glanced at me, a quick, almost impatient look. "Are you jealous, Caleb? Because this is about my career, my future, not anything else." Her ambition, once a shared dream, was now a shield, deflecting my fears, pushing them aside. "Walter wants me to go on an architectural retreat," Sarah announced one Tuesday evening, her voice casual as she buttered toast. "It's a long weekend in Traverse City. Apparently it's where all the big developers go to scout new trends and network. He says it's crucial for my exposure." My fork clattered against my plate. "A long weekend? With Walter? Sarah, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. It's not a business trip, it's something else." My gut twisted, a familiar, sickening feeling. The gifts had already been too much, too personal. This felt like a deliberate escalation. She sighed, a weary sound. "Caleb, you're being unreasonable. This is a huge opportunity. Do you know how many contacts I could make? How much I could learn? It's not with Walter, it's for Walter's company, for my future studio. This is how successful people operate in this business." She looked at me, her eyes firm, challenging. "Are you going to stand in the way of my career, Caleb?" The question hung heavy in the air, a barb designed to wound. I knew how much this meant to her, how hard she'd worked. But the thought of her being alone with Walter for an entire weekend, far from home, gnawed at me. I tried to argue, to reason, but her resolve was absolute. She saw it as a professional necessity, a stepping stone to the dream we had shared. My objections to her were just insecurity. She left on Thursday morning, a small designer duffel bag in hand. The house felt empty and cold without her. The weekend dragged. On Sunday evening she returned, her cheeks flushed from the autumn air, a new sparkle in her eyes. Around her neck, glinting beneath the collar of her sweater, was a delicate diamond necklace. I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What is that?" She touched the necklace, a small, almost unconscious gesture. "Oh, Walter gave it to me. A thank you for all my hard work on the Traverse City project. He said I have an incredible eye, and it was a small token of appreciation." Her explanation felt thin, too casual. My anger flared, hot and sudden. A token of appreciation? Sarah, that's not a token. That's a diamond necklace. This is not how professional relationships work. He's buying you piece by piece, her face hardened. Don't you dare accuse me of that, Caleb. I earned this. I worked tirelessly all weekend, pulling together concepts for 3 new developments. He's my boss. He's recognizing my value. Why are you always looking for the worst in everything? You just can't stand to see me succeed, can you? The accusation stung, a raw, unfair cut. We argued, voices rising, words sharper than intended, until silence descended, heavy and suffocating. She retreated to her studio, leaving me alone in the living room, the diamonds sparkling mockingly from her neck. After that, Sarah's hours grew longer. She was at Walter's office more and more, sometimes until late in the evening. Brainstorming sessions, she'd call them, crucial client meetings. The distance between us widened, a silent chasm. Her ambition, once a beacon, now felt like a wall. One afternoon, looking for an old tax receipt in her desk drawer, I found a small velvet jewelry box tucked beneath a stack of fabric swatches. Inside, a beautiful, delicate watch with a mother-of-pearl face, clearly expensive. And under it, a receipt from a high-end jeweler, dated 2 weeks prior, made out to Walter Croft. My blood ran cold again. It was undeniable. He was still showering her with gifts, and she was hiding them. The next day, my lunch hour stretched into an afternoon. I drove straight to Walter Croft's main office, a sleek, modern building downtown. The receptionist, a cool blonde, tried to intercept me. "Mr. Croft is in a meeting." "He'll see me," I said, my voice low and steady. I walked past her, down the polished hallway, until I found his open office door. He was on the phone, leaning back in his executive chair, a casual smile on his face. He saw me, and his smile didn't falter. He just raised an eyebrow, finished his call with a terse, "I'll call you back," and hung up. "Caleb," he said, "to what do I owe this unscheduled visit?" His tone was pleasant, but his eyes held a steely glint. "Stay away from my wife, Walter," I said, my voice barely controlled. My hands were balled into fists at my sides. "The gifts, the retreats, the late nights, it stops now." He leaned forward, his smile finally fading, replaced by a look of cool amusement. "Caleb, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sarah is an incredibly talented designer. I value her work. Any gifts are professional tokens of appreciation. Perhaps you're feeling a little insecure. It's understandable. A woman as driven and talented as Sarah needs room to grow. Maybe you're holding her back." He stood, walking around his desk, his movements slow and deliberate. "Don't mistake ambition for something else, and don't mistake my generosity for impropriety. You're out of line." I stood my ground, staring him down, but his calm confidence was unyielding. He had an answer for everything. I left, the anger simmering, but with no resolution, no satisfaction. That evening, I started watching them. At a neighborhood gala, I saw them across the room, talking, laughing. His hand lingered on her arm as he leaned in to whisper something. Her head tilted back, a smile on her face. They looked too close, too familiar. I felt like a ghost in my own life, an outsider watching my wife slowly slip away, bit by bit. "You're imagining things, Caleb," Sarah would say whenever I tried to talk to her. "You need to trust me." Her dismissive attitude, her easy excuses, made my frustration boil over. Our home, once a sanctuary, was now filled with unspoken tension, cold silence. The strain was palpable. I couldn't live like this, haunted by suspicion, dismissed by my wife. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof, a desperate last resort. The rain started around 5, a steady, cold drizzle that streaked down the kitchen window panes. "Another late night, Caleb," Sarah said, pulling on her light jacket. "We're trying to finalize the designs for the new downtown high-rise. Walter wants to review everything personally." Her voice was flat, devoid of the earlier enthusiasm, yet also devoid of any hint of discomfort. Just a simple, factual statement. "Right," I replied, my voice dry. I watched her grab her keys. My decision was already made, cold and hard in my chest. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway, its taillights glowing red in the gathering dusk. Then I pulled on my own jacket, grabbed my keys, and started the Honda. I stayed a block behind her, a shadow in the darkening streets. My headlights reflected in the wet asphalt, following the familiar curve of her taillights, until they turned onto Walter Croft Street. The pit in my stomach deepened, cold and heavy. I watched as her car, the same one we'd driven on our wedding day, pulled into his long, circular driveway. The lights in Walter's mansion were on, casting a warm, inviting glow that seemed to mock the cold rain outside. I parked my car 2 streets over, tucked beneath a stand of oak trees. The engine cut. The rain was blurring my vision, not just the water on the windshield, but the unreality of what I was doing, what I was seeing. Hours passed. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. Each minute felt like an hour, each hour a lifetime. My world, piece by agonizing piece, was crumbling in the quiet, insistent drumming of the rain. The interior of the Honda felt small, stifling, a coffin. I just sat there numb, listening to the wipers slowly squeak back and forth, clearing the water, but not the images in my mind. It was well past midnight when the front door of Walter's house finally opened. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the warm glow from inside. It was Sarah. Her hair, usually so neatly tied back, was slightly disheveled, a few strands escaping around her face. She walked to her car, her movements stiff, and climbed in. The engine started, a low hum, and she drove away, back towards our house. I waited a few minutes, giving her time to get home. Then I started my own engine, the sound loud in the silent night. The drive back was a blur of wet pavement and dim streetlights. I parked in the driveway, cut the engine, and walked into our house. The front door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling from the living room. She was standing there by the window, her back to me, still in her jacket. The air was thick with the smell of rain and unspoken truths. I closed the door, the click echoing in the sudden silence. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, her face pale. She knew. "Sarah," I began, my voice broken, a fragile thing that barely held together. "Where have you been?" The question was redundant, a formality. She tried to hold my gaze, then looked away, her eyes darting around the room, settling on nothing. I told you, Caleb, working late, the high-rise plans." Her voice was a thin thread of a lie. "No," I whispered, the single word heavy with all the pain and betrayal I felt. "No, you weren't. I saw you, at Walter's house, for hours." She flinched as if I had struck her, her composure shattered, her shoulders slumped, and she brought her hands up to cover her face, her body shaking. A low sob escaped her, then another louder. She sank to the floor, collapsing into a heap, her shoulders heaving. "I'm so sorry, Caleb," she sobbed, her words muffled by her hands. "I'm so sorry." The confession hung in the air, a final brutal blow. The air felt thin, suffocating. I stood there watching her, the years of trust, of shared dreams, of quiet companionship, all dissolving into dust. The physical ache in my chest was immense, a gaping wound. He just understood," she choked out, looking up at me through tear-filled eyes, trying to explain. "He understood my dreams, Caleb, our struggles. He made me feel seen, important, in a way you didn't." Her words, meant as an explanation, felt like another betrayal, twisting the knife. I was shattered, completely and utterly broken. The love, the foundation of our life, had just been ripped away. "Please, Caleb," she pleaded, reaching out a trembling hand toward me. Please forgive me. It's over. It was a terrible, terrible mistake, I promise. Her eyes were desperate, swimming in tears. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt nothing but a vast, aching emptiness. Forgiveness seemed impossible, a mountain too high to climb. Could I ever look at her the same way again? Could I ever touch her without remembering? Our dream home, the one we had worked so hard for, now felt like a tomb for our marriage, echoing with the sound of my hollowed-out heart. Life's choices, big and small, often carry a heavy price, sometimes beyond what we can imagine. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations and strained silence. Sarah tried to end things with Walter, I knew that much. I heard her on the phone, her voice low, trembling, pleading. But Walter was not letting go. She told me he just laughed, his voice casual, reminding her of their agreement, of all the opportunities he'd given her. He hinted at consequences. The air around her grew heavy with fear. Then one evening, curled on the sofa, her face buried in her hands, she finally told me. The words came out in a ragged whisper, barely audible over the thumping of my own heart. He has photos, Caleb. Videos. My breath caught in my throat. The world tilted. What are you talking about, Sarah? She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. From the retreat and other times. He recorded us. He said if I stop, if I ever tell anyone, he'll make sure they go everywhere. He'll send them to your work, to my family, to everyone in Fairwood Estates. Her voice cracked on the last word, dissolving into a helpless sob. He said he'll destroy us. A cold rage, unlike anything I had ever felt, washed over me. It was a freezing current that solidified every emotion into a singular, burning need for vengeance. This wasn't just a rich man having an affair. This was a predator, a calculating monster. He wasn't just seducing her, he was imprisoning her, holding her hostage. The gifts, the flattery, the opportunities, they had all been part of his elaborate snare. For a moment, a flash of bitter blame crossed my mind, aimed at Sarah. How could she have been so naive, so blind? Then the blame turned inwards, scorching me. Why hadn't I stopped it sooner? Why had I let my fears be dismissed as jealousy? Why had I trusted her reassurances over my gut? The anger at Walter, at Sarah, at myself warred within me, a brutal internal conflict. Sarah was a shadow of herself. Her vibrant energy was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed weariness. She moved through the house like a ghost, her spirit draining away with each passing day. The constant fear of exposure, of Walter's insidious control, hung over her like a shroud. She was a prisoner, and our beautiful new home, the one we had poured our hopes into, was nothing more than a gilded cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every unexpected knock at the door, sent a jolt of terror through her. Our life, once a shared dream, had become a waking nightmare. The silent battles fought within these walls were far more devastating than any shouted argument. I knew I couldn't just stand by. I couldn't let this happen. I needed help. I thought of Mike Henderson, the neighbor with the kind, knowing eyes and the grim warning. He seemed like a man who understood the shadows beneath the manicured lawns. I found him in his garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower, the smell of oil and gasoline thick in the air. I laid it all out for him, the whole sordid story, my voice flat, emotionless, just the facts. He listened silently, methodically tightening a bolt, his expression unreadable. When I finished, there was a long pause, broken only by the whirring of a distant fan. He wiped his hands on a greasy rag, then looked at me, his eyes tired but steady. Son, I knew Walter was a piece of work. I didn't know he was this kind of piece of work. He shook his head slowly. The pictures, the videos, that's a whole different game. He took a deep breath. This ain't just an affair anymore, Caleb. This is control, plain and simple. And it's illegal. What he's doing is blackmail. A wave of relief, cold and surprising, washed over me. Someone else saw it. Someone else understood. What do I do, Mike? I asked, the desperation finally seeping into my voice. He met my gaze. You fight, Caleb. You fight like hell. For your wife, for your marriage, for her dignity. He leaned against the workbench, his arms crossed. I might know a guy, a private investigator, not exactly legal, but he gets things done. Helps people who get stuck in webs like this. Mike's words were a spark in the darkness, igniting a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. The fight, I realized, was not just for my marriage, not just to salvage what was left of our life, but for Sarah's freedom, her dignity. Walter Croft had taken enough. It was time to take it back. Mike put me in touch with his guy, a retired police officer named Ray, who now ran a discreet investigative service out of a small, nondescript office above a hardware store. Ray was quiet, his eyes sharp, and he listened to our story without judgment, just a series of slow nods. Together, the three of us, Caleb, Mike, and Ray, began to meticulously plan Walter Croft's downfall. Our target was his reputation, his carefully constructed facade of power and respectability. Our goal, irrefutable evidence of his blackmail and predatory behavior. Sarah, though a shadow of her former self, agreed. Her spirit was broken, but beneath the fear, a flicker of defiance remained. She saw this as her only escape, her only way to claw back a piece of herself. Her face was pale, drawn, but her eyes held a new steely resolve. Ray produced a recording device no bigger than my thumb. It was designed to be voice-activated, with a battery life that would last for hours. We carefully nestled it into a hidden pocket in Sarah's large, expensive purse, one of the gifts from Walter. The plan was simple and terrifyingly risky. Sarah would go to Walter's office for her next scheduled meeting. She would, as Ray put it, poke the bear. She had to provoke Walter, push him to explicitly state his threats, his demands, and the leverage he held over her, all while the tiny device silently captured every word. The night before the operation, the tension in our house was palpable. Sarah moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, preparing her clothes, checking the purse, a faint tremble in her hands. We barely spoke, the weight of what was to come too heavy for words. I watched her, my heart aching with a mixture of fear for her safety and a fierce pride in her courage. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about her freedom, her very soul. The next morning, I drove her to a cafe a few blocks from Walter's office, dropping her off with a tight squeeze of her hand. Her face was pale, but her chin was set. "I'll be okay, Caleb," she whispered, her voice a little shaky. "Just be ready." I spent the next few hours in my car, parked where I could see the entrance to Walter's building, but far enough away not to be noticed. Every minute was an eternity. I imagined the conversation, the confrontation, Sarah's bravery, Walter's rage. My palms were sweaty, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. Finally, 3 agonizing hours later, Sarah emerged from the building. She didn't look at me, just walked directly to her own car, her back straight, and drove off. I followed, keeping my distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. We reconvened at Mike's garage, Ray already there, a small portable speaker on the workbench. Sarah sat silently on an overturned bucket, her eyes fixed on Ray. She was trembling, but her gaze was steady. Ray connected the recording device to the speaker. A low hiss, then Walter's voice, clear and chilling, filled the small space. "So you think you can just walk away, Sarah? After everything we've built? After everything I've given you?" His tone was smooth, but laced with a barely concealed menace. Sarah's voice, shaky but firm, responded, "Walter, I can't do this anymore. It's destroying my marriage. I want out." Walter chuckled, a cold, dismissive sound. "Destroying your marriage? That's rich. You think I care about your marriage, Sarah? I care about our arrangement and about your reputation." Then came the words, perfectly clear, chillingly precise. "You forget, Sarah, I have certain keepsakes, little mementos of our time together. A few photographs, a couple of delightful videos, very intimate, very revealing. If you decide to go public, if you decide to walk away, those keepsakes will find their way to a very public audience. Your husband, your family, your little design clients in Fairwood Estates. Everywhere. You'll be ruined. Your husband will be ruined. Everything you've built, gone. You understand, don't you? So no, you don't walk away. Not until I say you do. The recording continued for a few more minutes, Walter outlining his expectations, his threats escalating, Sarah's voice growing smaller, but she stood her ground, forcing him to reiterate his demands. Ray finally hit stop. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hum of the garage lights. I stood there listening to the echoes of Walter's voice in my head, the irrefutable evidence of his monstrous control. It was a bitter triumph, tainted by the raw pain of hearing Sarah's humiliation, but it was solid, undeniable. Mike leaned forward, his face grim. Good work, Sarah. That's exactly what we needed. He looked at me, a warning in his eyes. This ain't over till he's on his knees, Caleb. He's a snake and he won't go down easy. But as I looked at Sarah, at the small, defiant tilt of her chin, a fragile sliver of hope began to emerge from the wreckage, mixed with an overwhelming sadness for all that had been lost. We had the evidence. Now we had to use it. The meeting took place in Ray's small, functional office, far from the polished marble of Walter's domain. Caleb, Mike, and a no-nonsense lawyer named Ms. Evans, a sharp woman Ray recommended, sat across a worn conference table from Walter Croft. He walked in with his usual confident stride, a dismissive sneer on his face, clearly expecting a simple negotiation, another problem to be bought off. He brought his own lawyer, a slick, young man who looked perpetually annoyed. Ms. Evans didn't waste time. She placed the small digital recorder, still holding the damning audio, squarely in the middle of the table. Mr. Croft, she began, her voice calm and even, we have evidence of blackmail, coercion, and sexual harassment against our client, Sarah Miller. Walter's eyes flicked to me, then to Sarah, who sat quietly beside Mike, her face pale but resolute. Blackmail? Harassment? This is outrageous. My relationship with Mrs. Miller was entirely consensual, a mutually beneficial professional arrangement. He even managed a sneer, a flicker of his old arrogance. Ms. Evans pressed a button on the recorder. Walter's voice, clear and chilling, filled the room. His threats, his boasts about the keepsakes, his explicit promise to ruin Sarah and me if she ever left him. Each word was a punch to the gut, but also a vindication. As the recording played, the color drained from Walter's face. His swagger crumpled, replaced by a raw, naked fear. His lawyer, a sharp intake of breath, leaned forward, his eyes wide with alarm. Walter opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. The depth of his predicament, the undeniable proof, was staring him in the face. When the recording ended, the silence was heavy. I looked at Walter, no longer seeing the powerful developer, but a desperate, cornered man. Here are our demands, Walter, I said, my voice steady, my heart pounding a slow, deliberate rhythm. You release Sarah from her contract immediately with no penalties. You destroy all compromising materials you have of her, physical and digital, and you provide proof of their destruction. And there will be a substantial financial settlement for emotional distress and damages. My gaze did not waver. If you refuse, this recording, along with all the other evidence we've collected, goes straight to the police, to the press, and to every single investor and client you have. Walter finally found his voice, a desperate bluster. This is extortion. You can't possibly. We can and we will, Mike interjected, his voice firm, his eyes hard. You think your reputation in this town can survive a scandal like this, Walter? You think your Fairwood Estates brand can recover from headlines about blackmail and a compromised wife? Your empire, Mr. Croft, is built on trust and a clean image. You lose that, you lose everything. His lawyer, seeing the writing on the wall, leaned over and whispered fiercely in Walter's ear. Walter listened, his face contorting with fury and defeat. He looked at me, then at Sarah, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred. But he was trapped. He nodded, a barely perceptible jerk of his head. Fine, he choked out, his voice hoarse. I agree. Just keep this quiet. The fight was over, at least this part of it. Sarah was free. Physically, at least. The scars of her experience, the humiliation, the fear, ran deep, etched into her very being. Our journey to rebuild our marriage was arduous. Trust, once the bedrock, was shattered into 1,000 pieces. We sought counseling, talking for hours, trying to piece together what had happened, what had been lost. Our dream home remained, but it was tainted, a constant, silent reminder of Walter, of the affair, of the raw pain that had unfolded within its walls. The beautiful sunroom, once destined for Sarah's studio, now held a bittersweet memory. Slowly, painfully, we began to reclaim our lives. Sarah launched her interior design business, not under Walter's shadow, but on her own terms, with clients she chose, projects that genuinely excited her. She worked harder than ever, pouring her newfound independence into her passion. It was a long road, filled with difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and the quiet ache of what might have been. Walter Croft's reputation in Fairwood Estates was indeed shattered. While no official charges were pressed, a condition of our settlement was his swift compliance. Whispers spread like wildfire. His name, once synonymous with success, now carried the heavy weight of scandal. He faced social ostracism, his grand parties now sparsely attended, his influence diminished. There were rumors of investigations into his business practices, sparked by anonymous tips, hints of deeper corruption. The Miller family, though deeply wounded, stood on a difficult path towards healing. We had faced the darkness and survived, learning the true, devastating cost of moral compromises. It wasn't a clean victory, and there was no grand, triumphant ending. Just the quiet, persistent work of putting one foot in front of the other, day after day, trying to find a way back to each other, knowing that some things, once broken, can never be fully restored. The quiet streets of Fairwood Estates eventually settled back into their rhythm, but for Caleb and Sarah, nothing was truly the same. The silence in their home, once comfortable, now often held the echo of unspoken pain. Sarah's design studio flourished, a testament to her talent and resilience, but the shadow of Walter's control never entirely disappeared from her eyes. Caleb learned to live with the deep fissures in his trust, his love now a more guarded, more deliberate choice. Their dream home, though now truly their own, always carried the ghost of the ordeal, a constant reminder of how easily ambition could be twisted and how quickly a predator could unravel a life. They understood that while some battles could be won, some losses were permanent, shaping the landscape of a life forever. Their path forward was not one of erased memories, but of acceptance, of quiet endurance and the enduring fragile hope that, together, they could still find a new kind of peace. The quiet streets of Fairwood Estates eventually settled back into their rhythm, but for Caleb and Sarah, nothing was truly the same. The silence in their home, once comfortable, now often held the echo of unspoken pain. Sarah's design studio flourished, a testament to her talent and resilience, but the shadow of Walter's control never entirely disappeared from her eyes. Caleb learned to live with the deep fissures in his trust, his love now a more guarded, more deliberate choice. Their dream home, though now truly their own, always carried the ghost of the ordeal, a constant reminder of how easily ambition could be twisted and how quickly a predator could unravel a life. They understood that while some battles could be won, some losses were permanent, shaping the landscape of a life forever. Their path forward was not one of erased memories, but of acceptance, of quiet endurance, and the enduring fragile hope that, together, they could still find a new kind of peace.